Nous accueillons maintenant le professeur Kohlmeyer. Alors, là encore, est-il besoin de présenter l'homme qui a découvert le temple du dieu de l'orage d'Alep, ce temple dont les textes du Proche-Orient ancien nous parlaient beaucoup et qui effectivement existait bien et a été donc découvert dans les fondations de la citadelle d'Alep. Alors, avant de découvrir le temple du dieu de l'orage, Kohlmeyer, évidemment, a beaucoup travaillé sur le monde anatolien et il a notamment soutenu sa thèse qui s'intitulait Felsbilder der Ethitischen Großreichszeit, Entschuldigung, qui notamment a été publié en 83 dans la revue Acta Praehistorica et Archaeologica et qui est un élément important pour la connaissance justement des reliefs rupestres hittites dont nous avons vu quelques exemplaires tout à l'heure pendant la communication de Yitt. Et il enseigne actuellement à la Hochschule für Technik und Wirtschaft à Berlin. Et il a donc dirigé les fouilles de la citadelle d'Alep et des fouilles également au Sri Lanka. Et tout dernièrement, il était le co-commissaire de l'exposition Syria Matters qui a été présentée à Doha. Je vous laisse donc en compagnie de Kohlmeyer qui va vous parler de ce temple du dieu de l'orage d'Alep, un moment clé et charnière dans l'histoire de la sculpture monumentale syro-anatolienne entre l'âge du bronze et l'âge du fer.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you very, very much, Vincent, for the invitation and for you all coming. I'm really fascinated how many come to such a lecture. I'm not used to it in Berlin, I must tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, the inland route that links Anatolia with the south of Syria and Palestine passes through the agricultural lands of the interior. At the point where it crosses the shortest distance between the Euphrates and the Mediterranean coast lies Aleppo. Such crossroads served as a hub for extensive cultural and also scientific exchange. Travelers were always deeply impressed by the citadel hill of Aleppo, the most important Islamic medieval military construction in Syria. But during pre-Islamic periods, it was the seat of the weather god of Aleppo, ancient Halpa. He played a super-regional role in the ancient Near East, which explains the enormous size of his temple and the brilliance of its architectural decoration. The god and his temple demonstrate a defining characteristic of Syria's ancient history, the ability to integrate different religions. In the 3rd millennium BCE, the storm god was worshipped as Hada, and the rulers of Ebla, the capital 40 kilometers to the south, carried out restoration in his temple. Early Bronze Age spearheads in a foundation deposit with clear parallels to the so-called treasure of Priam and Troy give evidence to far-reaching relations. In the early 2nd millennium, Western Semitic immigrants called him Adu. He gained great significance as head of the pantheon of Yamhat, the Amorite kingdom ruled from Aleppo. Middle Bronze Age sculptures were influenced by Ebla. See them here. At the same time, providing that relief autostats, a very typical ancient Near Eastern architectural decoration, origin in northern Syria. In the later 2nd millennium, the Hurrians called him Teshub, the name under which he was venerated in the Hittites' capital. He stood in a prominent position in the order of gods as guarantors in international treaties and adorned the official seal of the Hittite great king, Morshili III. Among the Luvians, he was called Tahunta Tahunsa, in the marine world, in the 1st millennium, he was Harat. Elsewhere, one can see Celtic continuations, but nowhere are they manifested for so long a period as in the temple of the weather god of Aleppo. The focus of this talk is on the Hittite and Luwian periods, but I have to explain the layout of the temple in the previous period in order to work out specific Hittite influence. When the Hittites conquered Syria, they did not exchange the local rulers except in two important cities. Shuppiluliuma I established in Carchemish one son as viceroy, and in Aleppo another son as high priest, whereas we can observe a cultural continuity in the architecture in the other cities. Aleppo shows us a strong Hittite influence, and certainly it would be the same case as at Carchemish whenever layers of this period will be exposed. The layout of the temple in the early 2nd millennium in red, blue indicates the 3rd millennium, with a broad room of 27 by 17 meters and an antechamber flanked on one side by a staircase, embodies an unusual type of a so-called tower temple or Migdal temple in Syria. It has parallels in the Amok plain and in Palestine, Hazor, Sichem. You see, on the next slide. Although they are smaller than the Aleppo temple with external dimensions of more than 40 by 40 meters. Terracotta models from the Euphrates Valley show this specific temple type. In the 3rd and early 2nd millennium, the entrance and the cult niche lay on the same axis. This system was temporarily modified under the Hittites when the cult orientation changed to a bent axis. It was later restored to the old system. What happened in the course of the Hittite rebuilding? The plain slabs from the former cellar walls, these ones here, were replaced by reliefs. The majority of them shows so-called Fels windows, others bullmen, and the weather god in the center of the eastern cellar wall. In the northernmost part, the earlier slabs were hidden when the inner alignment of the northern wall was shifted towards the south and the former cult niche buried. I have to return to the last year. This is the new inner alignment, and the older cult niche is buried. The translocation of the weather god's seat from the north to the center of the east wall reflects the Hittite system of approach to a god, which necessitates a quarter turn for anyone entering. Windows, which could be opened with lattices or shutters, played an important function in the Hittite temple cult. But the former entrance could not be changed without huge alteration, and the windows could not build in otherwise than as mere illusion. The reliefs of the eastern, southern, and presumably western cellar walls depict Fels windows, I told you, and bullmen, two bullmen. They are characterized by a sophisticated Hittite style with best comparison to an ivory plaque from Megiddo. The lattice of the Fels windows is strikingly similar to Hittite temple models. You'll see here from Borskoy, Hatosha. And during the erection of medieval cellar rooms, some slabs were obviously excavated and reused for the upper Umayyad mosque of the citadel. The 2 meters high smiting god wears a typical horned cap, roseate decorated shirt, and rom-patterned kilt. He has an epigraph, see here, which is identical to the one of the weather god of Aleppo on the seal of Mosheli III that I've shown you before. His short dagger appears again on a second slightly damaged relief of the god with litos and lance, which was found in a pit. Both depictions have typical Hittite proportions for their bodies, with oversized legs and heads, oversized ears and eyes. It is a strong possibility that the god with Litos belonged to a series of gods which decorated an upper zone above the fel's windows and bullmen. The platform, which was raised south to the new northern wall, has a relief decoration at its front side. 3 reliefs are still in situ, but smoothened to create a flat surface for later reliefs, and the others were later completely exchanged. The remaining reliefs depict a mountain god and 2 composite monsters with winged body, lion body. One has a human head with horned headdress, the small lion head on the breast, and the other one has a bird head and a small snake's head. Parallels in glyptic art, especially from Meskene, nowadays Ema, indicate that they belong to a regional Syrian Hittite cultural variety with Hurrian influences. The inner gateway was protected with a fish genius and a sphinx and a lion. Most astonishing is the fish genius, 2 meters high, which follows Mesopotamian models. You see a cassite cylinder seal here, the imprint. And so maybe the work of a Hittite artist with Babylonian experiences or a Babylonian artist. The genius holds a pine cone as purifier in a bucket. The sculptures of the lion and the sphinx, as well as the image of the weather god himself, are of the same quality as those from the Hittite capital, suggesting that artists of the royal court were employed. Few fragments survived from a lion at the eastern gateway wall. They bear few signs of a Hittite inscription. Gateway inscriptions are well known from later from Luvian Aramean cities. An alteration in the 11th century BC was the removal of a now lost relief by the side of the weather god and its replacement by a king's image. With a king now in front of the storm god or weather god, the sense of the depiction changed to a dedication scene, and the cult direction was altered again to the former straight one. Due to the narrow rectangular size of the slab and, what's more important, the rather realistic proportional system of Luvian Aramean human depictions, the king raises his eyes above the storm god's head. Should be impossible. Attached to the king is a long incised inscription in hieroglyphic Luvian, which mentions cult instructions for the weather god of Aleppo and identifies the king with Taita, ruler of the Palestine people, a group of the sea peoples who contributed to fall of palace cultures in the late 2nd millennium in Syria and Egypt. To him belongs a lion at the entrance, very fragmented, unfortunately, opposite to the Hittite lion with the inscription. Obviously, this lion was produced as a replacement for a destroyed Hittite figure. The lion has an incised hieroglyphic inscription too, which continues over the head of the Sphinx. The inscription does not give further information for Taita. Here's the complete inscription, but mentions Carchemish and mules from Egypt, possibly indicating international relations. This slide gives you an overview, a summary of Taita's reconstruction of the temple and re-establishment of the former cult axis. David Hawkins dates the king on paleographic and historical grounds to the 11th century BCE, a date which corresponds with radiocarbon dating from the site. Taita's cultic revival obviously followed traditional lines, both in visual representation and in use of hieroglyphic Luvian hieroglyphs. On the other hand, his title, King of Palestine, suggests connections with the Philistines, and this might be corroborated by the appearance of Eastern Mediterranean influenced ceramics in northern Syria. Knowledge of the building in Aleppo, the sequence, helps us to understand the famous Temple of Ain Dara and its decoration too. The right part of the temple is unfortunately now completely destroyed by an air attack. As there are some sculptures now clearly attributable to the Hittite period, like these and others to the Taita period, and also the famous lion standing outside of the temple itself in Ain Dara has clear similarities to the Taita figurines in Aleppo. A last alteration dates to around 900 BCE or a little bit before, when the reliefs at the front of the northern platform were exchanged. The new decoration shows the weather god with his entourage of other gods and hybrid creatures. During the restoration works, the entire temple burned down and was abandoned. The reliefs were surely executed at the same time, but by different workshops, some more traditional, some more progressive. Some of the reliefs are unfinished. I will show you the reliefs very briefly, very shortly. The first one we discovered in a ceruleum, 2 bulls and a tree of life. The next, a god with a horn capped and a short kilt, carries a double rod and the other holds a bow. Then there is a god with pointed helmet. He stands on a ribbon, which might symbolize water. The pair of thunderbolts, which he carries in one hand, reveals his role as storm god, weather god. The crook in his other hand, his role as tutelary god. Followed by a sphinx and a lion, in rather bad quality, the stone, which might give an indication that the slabs were covered with metal sheets, perhaps silver or gold sheets. And then follows a very astonishing composite monster, which is notable for its Mesopotamian origin, 2-legged with human head, the body of a bird or scorpion, tail of scorpion, lion claws, and a small lion head on the breast. It walks across a stylized mountain, and we know this monster, Girtab Lulu, which appears in Mesopotamia, and they have an apotropaic function in the Neo-Assyrian period. The next one is a warrior god, which is about to thrust his sword into the breast of an enemy. And you see to the left forerunners. It's quite clear in the tradition of the 2nd millennium, an ivory from Ugarit and a Hittite seal impression. The next one is also very interesting, a winged goddess with a club and a sound instrument. This instrument is not finished, but we have a comparison I will show you later. This is obviously the depiction of a Shaushka figure. And then follows a god carrying a spear and a bow with an hieroglyphic epigraph which designates him as Korontia, the tutelary god of wild animals. Followed by the weather god himself, who is just about to enter his 2-wheeled chariot drawn by a bull. The particular type of a crossbar wheel on his chariot is rather antiquated and follows a model of the first half of the 2nd millennium. The god is shouldering a pointed club, and the mace symbol as an epigraph designates him in his special role. And text of the early 2nd millennium mentions the weapons of the storm god of Aleppo in his fight against the sea Temtu. And this forerunner of the Ugaritic myth of a fight between Baal and god of the sea might date back to the 3rd millennium BC, as in Ebla, the motive of the fighting weather god of Aleppo is known too. The weapons, two maces, also play a major role in the Ugaritic myth. And the victorious weapons are not only attributes of the god, but also cult objects. And bearing this tradition in mind, one is not surprised to discover this particular hieroglyph, until now unknown hieroglyph for the weather god of Aleppo. It follows this god with mace and spear, and then a winged genius with a bird's head. In one hand, he holds a bucket, in the other hand, a purifier in form of a pine cone. This type of a griffin demon is well known from Neo-Assyrian depictions, especially from the palace of Ashurnasirpal II in Nimrud. And like the Girtablulu, these Apkallu were considered to have an apotropaic aspect, and as figurines they were buried in houses in protective rituals. Then there is another mixed creature with a lion's head, again with bucket and a front as a cleaning device, purifying device. A goddess with cylindrical headgear, so-called Syrian goddess, wears two kivas, a mace, and she has this sound instrument now executed, which we also find in the hand of the Shaushka. Then there is a god with spear we cannot identify. There are in total 3 bullmen figures with different headdresses. While the earlier Hittite bullmen clearly have a supporting function, the later bullmen are apotropaic figures. They therefore go very well together with the other protective demons. Then we have other figures like the demon with a winged body. You see on the right, lion legs, scorpion tail, and lion's head. Unidentified are the god to the left, which is a tutelary god anyhow, and a god with a short kilt. He's also carrying a crook in his hand and a torch in the other. We know that there's a god of a torch in the Hittite pantheon of Aleppo. And then at the end, there are 2 antithetical lions leaping upon each other. Once again, the god I mentioned, the tutelary god, and another bullman. As I mentioned before, there are different sculptors working on the reliefs at the same time. For dating the last renovation, we have to look at the work of the most progressive artist, who executed the god with a bundle of thunderbolts and a crook. This relief has strong similarities to the Carchemish group of Sohikatuva and gives us a date around the last decades before 900 BC. The most traditional sculptors worked in the central group of the warrior god, the Shaushka, Gruntia, and the storm god himself. Perhaps they needed a more conservative depiction, and only here hieroglyphic names occur. I characterized Aleppo as a hub of knowledge exchange, and you have seen the artistic evidence in the temple's decoration, which provides important information on the Luvian Aramean art, its Hittite, Syrian, and Mesopotamian roots, as well as its influence on Neo-Assyrian sculptures. How can we explain processes like tradition, transfer of pictorial thought, or similarities or continuity of artistic expression? On the one hand, as is often assumed, by the migration of small art objects, the same goes with these Hittite small objects, bronze figurines, or metal, gold and silver objects, which were used as cult objects. On the other hand, and you see here a lion head as an example which shows clear proximity for North Syrian ivory carvings. Then there is a movement of sculptors. I considered this with the Mesopotamian fish genius of the Hittite epoch. Another example is shown here, a clear correspondence of the Aleppo bulls to reliefs in the palace of Ashurnasirpal II. This phenomenon was explained as a common convention that existed parallel in Assyria and northern Syria as overlapping artistic languages. Another explanation was that the peaceful bulls of Aleppo being killed in the gruesome tableau at Nimrud served as an option for ideological and propagandistic purposes. That means a symbol of Aleppo's weakness and vulnerability to Assyria's might. I disagree with both theories. With a large number of prisoners from northern Syria brought by the Assyrian ruler in his capital, it is more plausible that deported Syrian artisans continued to work in their way when they decorated Ashurnasirpal's palace. A special feature of the relief decoration of the temple is that although it came from different times, different epochs, it was always visible together. And the older reliefs could serve as direct models for later ones. Thus, the bullmen of the Hittite period formed the template for representations of a last construction phase, whereby the support function was changed to an apotropaic gesture and the hairstyle was partially misunderstood. The temple was therefore also a site of, let's say, sculptural education, of an artistic transfer. Thank you very much.